And we are live, I
Nice.
believe.
Yep, I just pushed mine.
Nice. Man, this software's so cool. I love the fact that we're able to stream to both platforms at the same time. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'll just get me being able to push with the actual title. Actually,
I think that honestly, the only thing that we need to do is have you sign into the platform, and then from there, sign into your Facebook so that they're synced, and then after that, it'd be fine. You know what I mean? Because if you look at my profile, it's working fine. By the way, anyone that's watching, we're going to start here in a couple of minutes. We're just messing about while people are joining and all of that wonderful stuff. So, yeah, if you look at my profile, you'll see that there's stuff going on. That that it's got the description.
I'll just copy what you have into mine real quick.
So, oh, go on.
I was just gonna say I was gonna set up my lights today, so I had like more standard lighting. I was like, I don't need to do it, and then today ended up being the most stormy fucking day ever, where it's so dark, and luckily I had this light, which seems to be good enough, but it was incredibly dark in here earlier. I was like, I feel very woefully unprepared all of a sudden.
Well, here's a good thing. We're actually doing this early enough to where I actually have some natural light, which is very nice.
That's because I mean, it's what, like 6 almost for you?
No, it's 6:40. So.
Oh, okay, right. Well, that's not bad. Okay, awesome. I can see it on live. Let me go ahead and edit this. Edit audience. Ooh, maybe I can't change. I don't think I can edit on mine once it's live.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
well.
I can edit the audience to change like who it goes to.
Well, you can change it once it's done, right? Once it's a published post.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll let me change it through here.
To those people that are watching, thank you for tuning in. We're going to get started here any second now. Once Jarod figures out Facebook.
I'm too old for this shit. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I was able to edit it on the live producer, and then that pushed it. If I edit the description, it sets it as the title on my profile. So,
hey, that's a bonus.
Yeah, on live producer, I don't know what setting the title does. It doesn't really seem to change anything, but no. So now I have an actual title.
Cool. Well, I'm going to stay on top of the comments on my profile if you want to keep the ones on yours open. Did you want to share it anywhere, or are we just leaving this one on the profiles?
Yeah, while we get started, I'll go ahead and share it to like Mindzone and whatnot.
Sure. So before we actually dive in, I'll tell you this funny story of what happened this weekend. It's not that funny, but it's funny for everyone but me. And some of you might have already noticed it from the pre-chat. But basically, when I was 9, I broke off my front tooth at our house. I literally fell off of my bed and face first onto some Lego, and ever since then I've had like half a fake tooth on the front row of my teeth. Well, this weekend, with absolutely no forewarning or pain or anything, that tooth broke off. Now, the big problem with that is that we're in a pandemic, and my dentist, along with every other dentist in the UK, is shut, meaning that I am now going to look like a toothless hillbilly for the foreseeable future, and have to do video calls and live streams with this guy here, which is just awesome. So there's that. I've already had to do quite a lot of explaining on calls yesterday and today, which has been a lot of fun, but I wanted to get that out of the way.
Are people asking, or you just bringing it up?
Well, I've brought it up for some people that like hadn't known me before, just because I didn't want it to come across as like such an awkward thing, and so I just wanted to like break the ice and just be like, hey, I now have a huge lisp and also a massive gap in my teeth until the dentist reopened. I actually was able to call my dentist, and they put me on a waiting list.
That's cool.
So that's pretty cool. Anyway, look, enough BS about my tooth woes. Um, Today is actually a really really cool session. I'm really excited because we weren't quite sure what we were going to talk about today, which was funny because we have another episode coming up on Thursday, and we already know exactly what's going to happen on that episode, but we weren't that sure about today, so that was kind of funny. So the the topic for today that we wanted to talk about was the differences between the pros and cons of white labeling versus partnerships. And specifically, obviously, we can talk about this very well in SEO terms. I would assume that what we're going to be talking about is going to apply to other industries and sectors, but it that's kind of where our experience lies. I really like this idea of talking about the topic because I think we've actually both been in both situations, right? Like we've both done white labeling and we've both done partnerships, at least on the supplier side, right?
Yeah, so I've done both white label. I've been both a white label supplier of other agencies. I've partnered with other agencies where they have used my services with their clients, and I've also been on the other side where um, I have historically in the past white labeled other people's services to my clients, and I've worked with partners to provide services to my clients. So of the kind of the four approaches, I've been on all four of them.
That's crazy. We've done, because of SEO Butler, that's kind of always white label, but as a white label like full service provider, we've done that for people, and then we've also done the partnership side of things. Maybe it's good to give kind of a bigger definition of the two and kind of going like what's the difference. So I'll start with white label. So white labeling is literally where you work with another company and you ultimately you take their products and you take their services, you sell them to your customers, your vendors, and you basically call them your own, right? So a really really easy example of that is SEO Butler sells content. I'm a random SEO dude. I have an SEO client. I buy the content from SEO Butler. I then sell it to my SEO customer as if my team wrote it, right? So that's white labeling, and obviously, that's done in loads and loads of industries, loads and loads of shapes, ways, and forms. But I would say that in SEO, I would assume, and I could be totally wrong, but I would assume that the vast majority of SEOs outsource / white label at least a part of the campaign. And the reason why I know that is because of the amount of orders that we get on SEO Butler, right?
Yeah, I would say it's incredibly rare, I would say, for an SEO company to do content in-house. That's probably the most number one thing that people would white label and that everyone would understand and not have really like, oh, you shouldn't do it that way, because like pretty much everyone does it. It's content is of course integral to SEO, but it's also not inherently an SEO skill set to be able to write good content.
Sure.
And so when it comes to white labeling as well, there's also kind of those individual silos, if you will, of like, okay, here's, we're white labeling content or links or like an audit, whatever it is. And there's also kind of the bigger scale things, which is kind of handling the entire campaign, where somebody hires you, you charge them whatever they charge the client, whatever, and you handle the entire kind of end to end of SEO, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think that that's something that is really, really popular, just because I think a lot of people start to find themselves to be really overwhelmed once they actually manage to get a client and they realize that they don't have all of the resources or don't have all of the skill sets, or they simply just don't want to deal with it, right? They don't want to deal with the fulfillment. They might not want to hire staff or whatever. Um, so yeah, that's basically what white labeling is. Do you want to take partnerships? I'm going
Yeah,
to close
sure.
my door here real quick.
Yeah, go for it. So conversely to white labeling, where you hire someone and then you represent the service, the product as yourself, and you then give it to the client while branding it as yourself. The partnership, conversely, would be where the client or the end customer, consumer, whatever, is aware of who's handling the work. Where, so for example, I go, hey, Mr. Client, Jonathan and his team are going to be handling this thing for you. Oftentimes, the partner would bill the client directly. And so basically, the client is aware that there are multiple people working on this compared to white labeling, where the client believes that everything is being done by you because you're branding it as yourself.
Yeah,
With
I mean
with
that's
yeah,
it in a can, isn't it?
yeah, and each of them, a lot of people kind of only do one, only like the other, but there's advantages and disadvantages to both white labeling and partnerships. I mean, I'll come out and say, like, I'm not a fan of white labeling. Really, like, I can't, like, I don't like white labeling my services, and I don't like when people, I mean, I don't like hiring people to basically white label their service. I think I'm much more in the partnership camp, and we can go into that. But are you in the same camp, or you prefer white labeling?
100% partnerships, but that wasn't always the way. And for me, I think it was a huge learning experience to kind of learn the upsides and the pitfalls of both, to then finally come to the decision of like which way works. I think that what's important there is, though, to make the distinction between white labeling an entire project and white labeling parts of a project. I'm a big fan of SEOs, for example, who do all of the on-page and the strategy in-house, but then they outsource the link building, or they outsource the content, just that because they don't want to have that burden of that team themselves. I'm a huge fan of that, don't get me wrong. But what I'm not a fan of is people who ultimately buy like an SEO package and then just put their own name on it and then become the bottleneck of the overall process, right? And we can kind of go into more detail on that in a second. I think that there are a couple of upsides and downsides to both, and I think it would be worth just kind of sharing like what some of the what some of those are from our perspective.
Yeah, sure. And so because so many people, like, I would say 99%, despite both of us preferring partnerships, I find that when I talk to people, everyone tends to be on the white label train. So let's start with some of the reasons why everyone, or so many people kind of love white labeling. And in my opinion, the number one thing that people love about white labeling is that you can charge the client whatever you want. So you can take a service that it's going to charge you $500 and you can resell that for $5,000. And while everyone loves it, this is also a double-edged sword, and we can get into that. But I think that's the number one thing, is that people love taking a service that, and don't get me wrong, sometimes you can find someone who is undervaluing their services and charge a premium within reason. But people love being able to go, okay, great, this partner is going to charge me, or this service is going to charge me $1,000. I'm going to resell this for $2,500, for $3,000, for $5,000, whatever it may be. And so you can, with white labeling, essentially have ridiculously massive margins because of that. Now, the downside, of course, of that is that if you charge too much, the chance of you actually being able to get results for that is pretty hard, because then you're basically someone that's charging you just doing $1,000 worth of work has to get the same amount of results that are worth, let's say, $3,000, $5,000.
Right, and the problem with that is that people do notice that, and like the way that you imagine the way that you have to imagine it is, if you, I'm trying to think of like a good comparison, but like imagine you took a McDonald's burger. You went to McDonald's, you took a 99-cent McDonald's cheeseburger, right? And then you put it and you take it out of that packaging and you put it into some really fancy packaging, and now you sell it to somebody for $12.99. And you know, if you take the piss on how much you're charging for that 99-cent cheeseburger, people are gonna start to get really upset because they're like, man, I would have paid $3 for that thing, but I'm not, I don't think that paying $13 whatever is fine. And so I think that that's definitely one of the pitfalls that many people make with white labeling, is that they don't seem to understand that they should actually be charging a reasonable amount of money, or adding a reasonable margin instead of absolutely wrecking it.
Right. And I think it's also a matter of focusing too much on the short term rather than the long term, because people will buy it, right? If you buy that, 99-cent burger from McDonald's, resell it for $13, people will buy that, but they won't be happy on the back end. Same thing with your services. You resell something that costs you $1,000 for $5,000. You were good enough at sales that someone bought it for it. Maybe you retain them for 2-3 months and then you lose them. So you made, 15K off of them minus, whatever the expenses there, compared to if you had charged, let's say it's worth it for you to charge, 2,000. So base still doubling, which is already an insane margin to put on that doubling whatever you were being charged beforehand. Then, you might, if the results are still there and reasonable within what they're paying, you might retain them for 5-10 times longer. So what you'll make is greater. Yes, it will take you longer time periods to make that, but you'll have that client for way longer than to just essentially churn and burn them. That actually happened to me where this was years and years ago. I was working with an agency where that they were white labeling me for every single one of their clients, and it was always really low work. Like I was making like $300 to $500 a month per client, just like a couple of hours a week sort of thing. Like the amount of work I was doing was very reasonable for that price. And so we had this one client, about $500, which is like the most I was getting from any of the work that we were doing. Client wasn't happy. Client was happy. Client called me like 11 and he's like, hey, client's pissed. They're not happy. I need to get on a call with them. I'm not qualified to do this call. Are you willing to jump on it? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I get on the call. And so they're basically just talking. I'm jumping in to talk the technical details whenever I can. And then the client lets it slip. He's like, I don't know why the fuck I pay you guys $5,000 a month.
Oh my God.
And I had no idea what he was charging the client. So after we got off the call, the client was like, well, like my client was like, so you weren't supposed to know that. I was like, yeah, I can bet.
No shit.
That's why they weren't happy, is because for $5,000 a month, I was getting paid $500 a month and working like a couple hours a week. Of course, they're not going to be happy. So that was the worst case I've ever been in.
That's one of those things where it's like, I totally see the upside for white labeling to be, you can charge whatever you want, you can add a nice juicy margin. If the white label partner is really good, it can be totally hands off for you on the fulfillment side. Those things are all fantastic. The downside, in my opinion, is that you start causing bottlenecks, right? So let's say that your client urgently needs an update on something, and if your white label partner isn't somebody that's communicative, you then have to put your client off to communicate with your white label partner, figure out what's going on, and then pass it back to your client. Now that might work, once, twice, 3 times, those kind of things, but it might really burn you in the long run when they're like, either this guy doesn't know anything or he's full of shit. You know what I mean? Like it's
right. And even if even if the communication skills on everybody's side are really great, just the time delay in and of itself can kill relationships given enough time. I mean, if I have somebody that reaches out to me, like, let's say a client emails me right now and that I had white labeled that project. Well, I'm busy right now, so I'm not going to see that for maybe 2 hours, given that we do this and then I'm working on other emails and then I get to their email. Then, okay, great. They have a question. I need to forward that over to the partner. Partner's busy. So 2-3 hours go by. Now, maybe for me, it's the end of the workday and I've logged off for the day. Partner responds. So then it's in my inbox for the morning. Go through my morning emails. Maybe it's a couple hours after the morning that I actually get back to it. So from the client's perspective, it now took maybe 24 hours to get an answer to something that may have been super simple. And at that point, like you
No,
don't
that's
feel
it.
very valued as a client if it was something that was very simple that should have been answered very easily, where you just got nothing. Or, I mean, like, things happen, people are busy, but when that happens over and over and over again, I mean,
It
you're not going to
becomes
feel.
painful.
I mean, I can't even tell you how many companies that I've stopped working with just because they took too long to communicate back to me. So I just hired someone that was more communicative.
Right, exactly. One of the other downsides of white labeling from the white labelers, no, sorry, from the supplier perspective, where we've been with SEO Butler, where we've been as an agency, is you lose control over how the deal is structured and how the client is educated, and that has actually in most scenarios been the biggest pitfall for us, is that the partners just didn't know how to sell SEO services, and so they made promises, they made assumptions, they promised particular services to be done that we were just not ready to deliver, right? But the other problem is that they became the partners, the ones that were actually white labeling our work, they would become the bottlenecks for communication as well, which would then massively delay projects in general, like you were just saying. So I think we've ranted enough about the potential pitfalls of white labeling. What would you say are some of the upsides of partnering off the top of your head?
So the biggest perk of partnering, kind of conversely to white labeling, where you can charge whatever you want over the price of the vendor, is that with partnerships you basically get the money for free because there is no work that you have to do. Maybe you charge $500 extra on top of whatever someone's white labeling for, but you're still handling reporting, communication, so on and so forth, right? You're still in the trenches to a certain degree with that client.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we're partnering, all the responsibilities for managing the account, making sure invoices are paid, making sure, getting into meetings, scheduling meetings, following up on, hey, why didn't we get this? Or, when can I hear back from you on this? Like, that's all on the partner. So sure, maybe, you have a partner where they sell their services for $2,500, maybe you get a 20% back. So that would be $500 or something like that. So maybe, and depending on the service, depends on it, could be anywhere from like 5-20% of my experience. So even if you get a smaller amount per se, it's basically, quote unquote, free money, because you just send the partner an invoice, they pay it, and you don't have to do anything because everything for that relationship is on the partner. I think that's the number one upside, if you're comparing it, is that it's all the weight is off your shoulders. You don't have to worry about anything. It's just, okay, great, they're doing their thing. You're basically just making money for another company to provide their services to the client.
It's really what it is. It's leveraging trust and relationships, right? So usually I see partnerships work really well where the one person that's doing the introduction kind of does like the pre-sale. So they do the qualification of the client, they identify if the client's going to be a good fit for this partner, they do all of that base research, and then there's a second call on which the pitch and the sale happens. But the thing is, because it happens in that two-step kind of game, the partner is actually able to already establish a certain level of trust before they've ever introduced the partner, right? And so when you get on that second call, like we do a lot of partnerships now, man, the close rate on partnership calls is so high because the partner has usually already disqualified anyone that's not worth talking to, right? One of the other upsides that I think is really good for partners is the fact that they're handing off responsibility for results, right? That's massive. I mean, obviously, if you recommend someone and they turn out to be an absolute piece of shit and they like con the client or something like that, that's always going to come back to you. But like if things are going to take a while and they're not so happy with the results or whatever for whatever reason, then it tends to be that you're kind of hedged against that a little bit because you've just made the introduction, right? Obviously, you never want it to get to that point, and a responsible partner would be on calls frequently to identify whether it's something that's working out, if they're still happy with results and that kind of stuff. But I definitely think that that's an aspect that's really beneficial. And also, I kind of feel like by having that partner, you can almost play like good cop, bad cop. You know what I mean? Like you can, like we have partnerships where if we're really trying to like leverage something, like let's say there's a budget increase that needs to happen, right? The partner might not have been on like the last 4 calls, but we might say, hey, Jarod, we're going to try and get this client ebay.com. We're going to try and increase their budget by $2,000. Can you hop on this call and tell them why it's such a great idea that they do that? Right. And we just like leverage that relationship again.
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, that's also kind of ties into another really great thing is that the person who's doing the service, the company that's providing the service, is going to be a hell of a lot better 9 out of 10 times of selling and upselling and retaining clients compared to you. Like,
man.
Like, so I don't know about you, but when it comes to like our sales and proposal process, I've spent so much time kind of refining it to make sure that, okay, these are the exact, case studies that people like to see. These are the exact kind of points about our business that people really like to see. And, here's how we frame our services that people really connect with. And so when somebody else is doing that and they don't have all that, or even they don't have the experience of, even if you're like white labeling that entire like slide deck, if you will, they still don't have the experience of going through it, 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever it may be. So like the close rate tends to be much lower. The ability to sell for as high tends to be a lot lower as well. Like, for example, I work with a lot of law firms, and if someone is trying to, let's say, white label my services for legal marketing, they've never worked with law firms, they don't work with a lot of law firms, it's going to be really difficult for them to demand super high or premium prices compared to me with the experience of being able to go in there. And then, yeah, sure, maybe beforehand they were able to sell my services for, let's say, $2,000, and then maybe they charge the client $3,000 and that was their markup. Or maybe I could have gone in there, sold the client on $5,000, given the partner 10, 20%, whatever it may be, so they still made the same margin as they would have beforehand, but now I'm able to provide a higher level service. And now maybe great, after we get some results, I can turn that into a $10,000 a month client. And not everyone has the ability to kind of, or the kind of the confidence to pitch those sort of pitches.
That, I think you just hit the nail on the head with that last thing you said. The vast majority of SEOs, especially that I've come across, do not have the confidence to pitch a $5,000 a month deal, a $10,000 a month deal. They don't have the confidence to sit there in front of, virtually or in person, in front of, a board of directors or whatever, and give a 1-hour monologue walking them through all of the reasons why your business is amazing, etc. So why why bother trying to build that if you can just be the introducer, right? So that's kind of what I love about partnerships. It's just simply that that fact is that you're able to come in and say, hey, Alex, my guy Jarod, he is the guy for PPC. I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna be here throughout the entire call. So if you have any questions, just pipe up. But he's gonna walk you through exactly what he wants to do with your account. Boom, right? That's your job done. At the end, you're gonna go, hey, Jarod, that was a great presentation. Alex, what did you think of that? You know what I mean?
Right,
like it's
exactly.
just, it's so easy.
It's easy. It makes all the sense in the world. I think it really just goes back to those kind of two things when we're talking about whitelabel, is that I think too many people feel as though that they, quote unquote, deserve a ridiculously high, kind of upsell on it. So great, this is $500. I'm going to sell for 5,000. So I think people get too attached to, okay, great, there could be a lot of money here. But also I think people are also too afraid. They're kind of afraid that if they partner with someone, that the partners are just going to steal all their clients, which is very kind of very unreasonable. And if you're partnering with someone, or if you're white labeling with someone that you have that fear, you shouldn't be working with them in the first place. But that's another thing I come across is when I've talked to people, and they're like, hey, what kind of relationship would you prefer? There seems like they're very protective over, what happens if clients more happy with what you're doing than what we're doing? Like we can have contingencies for if that happens, or what that would look like. But
sure.
But we've talked a lot about we seem to have really downplayed white labeling and kind of put partnerships kind of on a pedestal. But there's pros and cons to everything, and there has to be some reasons why someone might choose to not partner with someone and might prefer that white label experience, even though we've kind of gone through the pros and cons.
I think that I think that white labeling has a place, especially where you're working with small retainers, right? I think that those are just easier for people to stay on top of, to manage, etc. When you're dealing with the people that are doing $500 things for micro businesses, that kind of stuff. I think that white labeling can probably work really well in stuff like PPC and stuff like that. I think it can work well there if you find the right company to partner with. I just think that when you start dealing with more touch points, the more touch points that there are, the better it is for you to be in a partnership rather than in white label. Like when I think of the retainers that we have that are around 5K and upwards, man, you're talking probably, 15 to 30 client communications a month. Right? Just on little tasks, oh, this content's been finished, you need to approve it. Oh, we want to no index this page, is that okay? All of these things, and you have to think, if that was a white label partner, that would be going to the partner and then to the client and all of that. Whereas on a small client, man, they're getting 2 blog posts or 3 blog posts a month, whatever. They're getting, I don't know, two backlinks, some citations and whatever, right? It's just set, it's done, you're Gucci. So I think that you're right. It really has its place, and I think that there are pros and cons to both. I think though that, I don't know about you, but for us, we definitely started in white label when we were doing, as in we were offering white labeling to people when we were doing smaller things, and now that we're moving on to bigger and better things, we're now dealing with offering much better partnerships just because of the size of the retainers that we do these days.
Yeah. So when I was kind of getting started, I would say the vast majority of what I was doing was white labeling at the time. Then when I kind of started to kind of form and be like, okay, great, it's agency model, I started to take a step back from it. And nowadays, I think I only have 1 or 2 kind of white label products, but they're always on the smaller side of things. Regardless of how it is, it's like when someone comes to me and they're looking at white label, it's almost always a kind of a smaller thing. And I find that as soon as we start talking about partnerships with people, they get very kind of uninterested / afraid because it's unknown to them and they've never kind of gone that route, so they're a bit afraid of it. So most of the time when other agencies come to me, 99% of the time we don't end up working with them, because we just go okay, great, here's how we would want to partner. They're like, yeah, I don't
Sure.
like that. So it's great, then we don't have to worry about it. Yeah, so I've kind of distanced myself quite a bit just because I'm really not interested in that. And for even with we're just very particular when it comes to working with other agencies. I had somebody where I won't say their name, but they looked like they could have been a pretty good partner, and I checked out their website, and they were just stealing content from other people in our industry and posting it as their own, and stealing other people's case studies and posting it as their own. I was familiar with everybody's site, and it wasn't small people's site. It was if I said any of the people that they stole the content from, you would know who they were.
Right.
And so as soon as I saw that, I was like, no. So that was the only recent one that I was oh, this could work out. And then 10 seconds later, I was like, nope, not going to happen.
No, that's just not okay. And that's kind of what you touched on earlier as well. That I think is another important thing. People are like, well, how can we trust people and all of that? Well, if you think that somebody is going to do a bad job or steal your client or whatever, you can first of all, you can obviously put contracts in place, which is always a good idea. But second of all, if you have any of those fears, then you should probably not do that partnership with that person. But that partnership with that person should be something that you have absolutely no inhibitions about, because that also will come across in your recommendation when you actually recommend those people, right? If you're not confident in that recommendation of that partner, then that deal is never going to happen. One of the only other downsides that I can see with partnerships, having thought about it some more, is for people that are trying to build an agency that they're hoping to have acquired. I guess if you do everything in a partnership, then the overall revenue of your agency doesn't grow, because you're more of an affiliate than you are an agency owner, if you will. And so I think that would be a good argument, but I think that the people that are looking to white label, outsource, partner their projects out aren't looking to build that kind of agency anyway, because the people that are looking to build that kind of agency, that are looking to sell their agency at some point, they would typically go down the staff route, no matter if on-site or off-site or whatever, right? Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're choosing to go the white label route just because the money comes to you, so that, I think at that point it's just vanity, where you're able to say, hey, we make $50K a month. In reality, you have $35,500 in expenses just because you have to pay the white label person. And so I think at that point, if you're focused, it's just for the vanity of saying, hey, look, we quote unquote make a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. I get you. Moving on. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say that when it comes to kind of the downsides of partnering and where you might choose to white label, is this is going to be a super rare situation that you find yourself in. But if you are someone who is good at sales and you find somebody who has a great service that's underpriced, so that somebody is, let's say, they are just an amazing, SEO advertiser, whatever it is, they price themselves at $1,500 a month, and you look at that and you're like, man, that service in and of itself, most people are probably selling that for $2,500 a month. Maybe you turn around and sell their $1,500 thing for $3,500 a month, because it's worth $2,500 in the first place, and you think that they're so good that you'll be able to retain clients, and you're good at sales, you're good at client communication, where you can retain them when things are slow. So I think for anyone that wants to do on the white labeling side of things, you have to have a high level of sales skill. You have to know that the person that you're white labeling is undervaluing their own services. Otherwise, you're going to be able to put very little margin on top of what they are, especially if they're not very good. Then you can basically put no realistic margin on top of that.
Yeah.
And you have to be really good at client communication for that retention, so that you can handle those fires that come up of, hey, why did it take 2 days to get back for me for whatever it may be? When your white label seller disappears for 3 days without notice, and you're like, hey, what's going on? And then the client's like, what's going on, that you can diffuse that situation, that you can upsell people, that you can basically sales and communication. And if you have that person that is undervaluing their services, then that could be a great recipe for success. But that's going to be a pretty rare situation, especially in our industry, where most people that are in our industry do not come from the sales side.
Yeah, no. I totally get it. Agree, all of that. So before we crack on, I wanted to bring up a couple of quick comments here, just because they have actually been coming in, and I just wanted to pop onto those. So let me just go through here. First of all, Craig Campbell popped on here, which is awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Craig. Love your stuff. He said he's always stoked to see when we're live, see what kind of stuff he can steal from us. So looking forward to that. BB commented saying that she had someone white label for her one time and it was a huge mistake. BB, love you. Thank you for joining. I would argue that the huge mistake was in who you were working with more so than the concept of white labeling. There are loads and loads of ways that you can successfully white label or partner, as we've been discussing. So always, reflect on that and kind of see whether one of those two can work. Gareth Dane actually jumped on as well, and he gave us some really awesome advice on software to use for the live stream. So we're going to hop on that after this live stream and check it out. Thanks a lot, Gareth Dane. Martin, good old friend of mine, jumped on and said that we should probably upload this to YouTube. Sir, it's already in progress. We'll get on that. Thanks so much. And then Hanson made a really interesting comment that I think we've already kind of addressed, but we should just retouch on. He said, trying to offload work to minimize my own time involvement, since I want to focus on my own projects, but I'm afraid of my clients getting stolen by them. And he then followed up, my outsourced team charges hourly, and I want to quote my clients in monthly retainer prices. And I also want my outsourced team, who are good in English, to manage client communication and CC me. So that is a lot.
Yeah, so just to make sure, so right now there is a white label relationship happening, and one of the fears is, among other things, that their expectation is that they're afraid of the clients being stolen in a partnership relationship, right? So it's kind of that bridge, is what it sounds like.
And in addition to that, there are even more problems with the scenario, right? So he also wants to charge monthly because it's much cleaner, but his outsourcing team charges hourly, and his outsourcing partner who's good in English, he wants them to actually manage the communications. I think and I'm sure you're going to agree with this. I think this should be a partnership rather than a white label situation.
Yeah, this 100% rings that it has to be a partnership. With white labeling, you're more so looking for a more standardized kind of cookie cutter approach. People who actually have businesses, that white label is actually something that they do to a certain extent. Typically, you'll find that the processes, they'll have separate processes defined for anything that's white labeling, and it's much more cookie cutter, so that everything can be like copy and paste regardless of who it is, because they understand that the pricing is probably a bit lower than what they're actually charging their main clients, and they have to be more controlled over their expenses, because it's a lot easier to go to a direct client and be like, hey, I need more money, than it is to like a white label partner, have them upsell, things like that. So I would say 100% has to be a partnership. Now, the main thing here that seems to be the fear with which I just pulled it up, afraid of my clients getting stolen by them, is if that's a true fear where you are afraid of that individual company stealing your clients, you shouldn't be working with them in the first place, because they're probably a pretty sketchy company, if that's an honest to God fear that you have. Now, it could just be something that's like, hey, this is new territory for me, so this is just something that could happen. You're like, hey, here's my list of scenarios that could happen. One of them is just there. That is something where you need to have an agreement in place, especially if that is your main service. So I don't think he mentioned it, but I'm just going to say it's SEO. I don't think it was mentioned anywhere, but I'm going to assume. So let's say it's SEO and you only provide SEO, and that's what you're white labeling right now, compared to if, let's say you did let's say SEO and then like Google Ads is something you just start white labeling on the back end, where it's just like this extra thing that you do. If it's your main service, you 100% need to have some sort of agreement in place where it's, okay, if the client cancels, you're not allowed to take the client on, you're not allowed to whatever without me getting this sort of cut. You just basically had to work through the legal side of things of, okay, what exactly happens if the client decides that they want to, work with them directly or whatever it may be. And you can still have a partnership set up where you bill the client, so the client's always billing you. So it's not like, hey, there's something sketchy happening here. You just need to basically sit down with them and be like, okay, great, here's the relationship that I want. How can we make it work? And I would say, let them guide it as well, because it's their service. They know how to price it, sell it, etc. And you just wiggle in where your kind of needs are. Like, okay, great. Yeah. You do hourly. I want to be able to sell this on a retainer. So how can we work that in together? Because you can still get that relationship to work where you just set, okay, great. You can not work more than, let's say 20 hours on this. Sure. Whatever, and maybe have an agreement with them. It's just that, hey, if your team goes over 20 hours, we agree not to pay it. So just make sure your team is actually staying within your own budget. right? That should be something that they should be doing their end. So
yeah, I totally unequivocally agree with everything there. And I actually think that there's a really important thing to note here. Is we've had this comment a couple of times, and Hanson's just added it as well, saying that, whether the outsourcing partner is going to honor that agreement, especially if they are abroad. Now, you're absolutely correct. International agreements are incredibly hard to enforce. It can be very, very difficult to enforce an international agreement, especially if it's not worth a lot of money, right? If it's a $1,500 retainer, so difficult to it's almost like, what's the point of hiring a lawyer over there, and those kind of situations. So I totally get that. Don't forget though, if you're the introducer, if you're doing what Jarod just said, where you are becoming the client advocate in that scenario, where basically you're saying, this is my client, I look after them, but I'm introducing you as the vendor that's going to supply the services, then your contract with them can stipulate that they may not circumnavigate you to go directly to the outsourcing company. And as long as the client is in your country, you should be able to do that. Now, obviously, I can't give you any legal advice, and you have to check how that works out based on the legal, the law that you're working within. But I would imagine that would be possible.
Yeah, now, I mean, that seems pretty easy to put in there. Again, I'm not a lawyer either, but I mean, in most legal contracts, from what I've seen and what ours says itself, is that that you're not allowed to steal each other's employees. I think that you could probably, obviously advise with a lawyer, to put something in there that, hey, this also includes this individual company, or maybe just be like, hey, you can't work with any of our vendors directly, right? So,
right. Well, and there's an added bonus here, Jarod, and this is what a lot of people forget. If you're just the white label SEO guy that they're doing SEO with, it could actually be hard for you to upsell other services if you ever want to, right? Like PPC or Facebook ads or whatever. Just because some people genuinely think that way, that they're like, well, he's an SEO expert, he's not going to know about that stuff. And then you see them going and giving somebody else a 10K retainer to do PPC. Well, if you're the relationship manager, if you're their marketing guy, then you can say, oh, we're crushing it with SEO. I can see you have some extra budget. Let me put you in touch with my guy, Steve, who's a great PPC guy. Boom, there's your second partner, right? Now you're introducing Steve, who's going to do PPC. Boom, you're introducing Scott, who's doing Facebook ads. And all of a sudden, that one client that's paying you $1,000 a month in commissions is suddenly worth, $2,000, $3,000, whatever. Right. And that happens. It happens all the time. I think that it's such a funny thing. Like, I think that the whole white label versus partnership thing is something that is always going to evolve. People are always going to either love one or hate the other, whatever way. But for me, it's been a really interesting journey to go through professionally, and also to be able to look back at and go, yup, white label worked really well for us. As the supplier, again, just as a disclaimer, as a supplier, white label worked for us really well in the beginning. We learned a lot from it. Now we're doing the fulfillment as partners of the people that are selling us and recommending us and stuff like that. And we've just found that it works much better. That's it.
I mean, 100%. Looks like quite a few more comments have come through just within the past 10 minutes or so. I'm just still looking at yours. Hanson followed up with, I'm worried about providing my outsourced team with link sources for fear they'll resell them to others. So when you have your own, assuming it's actually unique and that it's not just something that you heard from a conference that's anyone can find, and you're just worried about someone else finding the same blog post that you did. If you have something that's actually unique or dare I say proprietary to yourself, then that is a risk that, hey, if you have your own strategy that works really well, at that point I would be looking at more so in-house people. If you actually have something that you're like, hey, I just don't want a bunch of random companies using our own tactics or software or whatever it is, just because you really can't control that. And especially when you get into more legal matters. Personally, I would be way more afraid of somebody taking my methods and tactics than I would have been them stealing my own clients. I think that the client will be easier to protect than it is like, okay, here's this method, because then you get into a lot of really dodgy details where it's like, okay, well, how unique is it? Could someone else have just come up with this? Does anyone else in the world do this sort of thing? So I think that's where you run into issues on the legal side. But I mean, honestly, if you have something that's actually unique, proprietary yourself, that's more of a, to me, that just screams like you need to be doing that in-house. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, at the end of the day, too, I'm one of those people that kind of I wouldn't do these kind of deals with people that I don't trust. So I know that we're kind of spinning in circles here, but for me, that's really the biggest thing. If I don't think I can trust you with my resources, then we probably shouldn't be partnering up. And I also would argue again that some of these things are going to be bottlenecks. If I'm trying to go fully white label, then why not give those guys the best possible tools to work with? And if I'm not going fully white label, then it should be really clear, you guys do the on-site, we do the link building, and you hire a couple of VAs or in-house staff or however you want to do it, and then you can lock that down, right? And obviously the reality though is with proprietary information and with intellectual property and stuff like that, is that it's incredibly hard to protect. That's just the reality, right? Like if somebody leaves with your guest post database, something like that, well, that's great. But once they've posted it somewhere, the cat's out the bag. You can sue all you want. The sad thing is most of the time those kind of people don't have any money for you to get out of them. So, that lawsuit's going to cost you a bunch and you're going to sit on the legal debt. So I think that's kind of in a way, it is a fair point. I think it's a mute point because I think that you shouldn't be putting yourself in that situation to begin with. You either work with people that you trust or you don't.
Yeah. There was an interesting comment from, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name, I apologize. But I'm offering white label services and would love to move to partnership model. How can I find partners? My current source of white label clients is mostly freelance platforms. So if I'm understanding this correctly, they are a white label service provider, and they want to, instead of having other companies white label their services, they want to instead partner with companies. And right now they're finding people through freelance platforms, the places I'm assuming like freelancer.com, Upwork, Bark, I think is one or sort of sites that people know. So I'll take this question just because this is something that I've done, and anyone that knows me knows that I've spent a lot of time on these platforms. Is that how can you find partners? Is just changing. One thing is changing how you pitch your services. Anytime someone comes to me that's an agency, they want a white label, I basically talk them through a lot of the points that we talked about on this conversation, which is where I took most of my notes for what we would talk about from. Is just like, okay, I go over like, this is what you want to do. This is the better way to do it, in my opinion. This is why. And then some people are open to it, some people are not. You're not going to be able to sell them on something if they're not open to it. So it's going to be more difficult because a lot of the questions that we've seen come in that we've addressed that people have questions for, these people are going to have those same questions and reservations. They're going to be afraid that you're going to steal their clients. They're going to be afraid that they're not going to make as much money off of your services nowadays. So you need to be able to address those. But I would say first, just try when people come to you to white labeling, talk about being partners. But you also have to look at what those people do. So for example, if they're an SEO company and they brand themselves, we are an SEO company, and they're looking for someone to white label SEO services, it's very unlikely that they're going to have a partner, because then the client's going to go, well, why would I hire you if you're just the middleman, because they're not offering anything else. Whereas if they're, let's say, an SEO agency, and let's say you do web design and they want to bring in a web designer, then that makes a lot more sense because, okay, we are an SEO company, and sometimes clients come to us and they need web design, or sometimes existing clients need web design. Then they can say, okay, great. No, we partner with this company, or it's just a referral, right? Sometimes a client comes to me and I'm like, hey, I would love to help you, but SEO isn't right for you. I think this advertising platform is right for you. This isn't something that we do. Please go talk to this person. That person's a partner. Even though I never have any sort of relationship with that client necessarily, I still get a commission from that partner. So a couple things there. I spoke a little bit fast, but if it's their main service, probably not going to happen. If it's a side service, then you can kind of bring up that relationship. But I think it's just a matter of trying to work with them, trying to convince them and figure out what their objections are and just answering that.
I would add, the only thing I would add to that, Jared, is the best partners that we've gotten is converting pre-existing relationships. So hit up that web designer that's given you your best project, right? Hit up that Facebook ads guy that's asked you for help on SEO a couple of times on a white label basis and say, look, do you notice this bottleneck? Do you notice? And then talk them through all of the problems of them white labeling it, and then sell them on the point that they could be making a recurring commission for introducing you once. Honestly, that's all it takes. And usually that's how you get the best partners, is if you already have that relationship established, right? Because like you just said, Jared, like they will have those same reservations. And sometimes, yes, you can convert them from cold directly into becoming a partner. But in my experience, the best partners come out of relationships where you've already established that you're a good guy or girl or whatever, right? Like, so that's really the big one. I think we're almost out of time. I think we've been going on for a hot minute here.
About 55 minutes so far. And I mean, I think we did a pretty good job of covering, pros and cons of each, our experiences behind them. We got some great feedback with people. Hanson asked what the definition of white labeling is. Once the recording's done, if you watch it from the beginning, it's like the first thing that we talk about, like 2-3 minutes in. So, go ahead and you'll be able to see that there.
Sure.
But honestly, I'm super happy with how this turned out. It seemed like people are really engaged with it, got some good feedback. We got some software that we can try, because that's been a big bottleneck for us over the past 3-4 days, is just trying every single one of these that we've done. We've used a different platform so far. So I guess our next one, or in the intermedium before that, we'll use a different one again. So that's going to be fun. And then Hinson just said, thanks for the advice, making kind of a client. How that works for me. Hopefully, let us know how it goes for you when you try some of this stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. Just before we disconnect here, a couple of really important points. This Thursday is going to be our next episode, which is going to be huge. We actually have a special guest on for the first time. It'll be episode 4? Yep. Episode 4. We have none other than Dino Gomez, who is a fantastic guy, first and foremost, a very, very good friend, who's made the transition from SEO to really learning the Facebook platform, and then actually becoming a high-end course provider for the Facebook platform with his very successful course. By the way, all of these are strictly no pitch, of course. They're all informative. That episode, I think right now, the working title is Origins. Jarod, Dino, and I are going to be talking about kind of what mistakes we made to end up being stuck with digital marketing. No, we're going to talk about how we found our way here, and just kind of share some stories and sort of experiences that we've made. I've also pinned a comment on the live video of a link on Jarod's website. We're going to add an official site soon, but a link on Jarod's website where you can sign up to get notified about when we go live next, as well as getting replays. Man, it's been real. This has been a good episode.
Yeah, it's been a good one. Thank you everyone for, of course, hanging out with us while we complain for an hour.
Right? Love it. It's been real, guys. Love you all. See you on Thursday, hopefully. And don't let the COVID isolation drive you insane. If you get too bored, watch back the last 2 episodes. It's at least 2 hours of content. And we'll see you then.